Just a brief overview of what we're going to get tonight. First, why an IMS middle school, okay? How it really matches to what the world looks like today, and how is an IMS middle school helping prepare students for that kind of world, and how we're putting this together. And I'll tell you what, every school is addressing and asking this same question, right? How do we prepare kids for a future we don't know about? Or how do we even prepare kids for what's existing now?
The Montessori mission of education is to care for life. Specifically, in the youngest ages, foundation, early childhood, the Montessori mission or purpose is to help children become independent. To know that we've cared for life is to assist children in being able to think, act, make responsible choices. This purpose doesn't change because now we're in middle school, but it gets to be a little bit more sophisticated. At the middle school age, independence means learning to succeed by your own efforts, including becoming economically independent. When the child comes to 7th or 8th grade, they might be 12, 13 or so. It's just going to be a very quick 6 or 7 years, and now they're an adult, a young adult, but an adult nevertheless, who needs to have the skills of economic independence. We take that as an example of the school must satisfy all the needs of life. We don't ignore academic work in our middle school, but we also don't ignore the whole person.
And so what does research say about what adolescents need? Kids are longing for independence, longing for having the ability to make their own choices, especially when it comes to their learning. But we also know that students need a small setting in adolescence. They need to feel a sense of belonging in a small community. That sense of community gives them a grounding. It gives them a place that's safe to take risks.
In a small setting, the benefit is the students learn to manage their emotions, they learn to communicate, and they learn to problem solve everyday real issues. Adults who understand developmental needs is the backbone of a Montessori education. The developmental needs of the adolescent we're about to share with you.
And in this particular case, it's teachers taking on a different role. It's them learning right alongside the child. At this time, learners are very much looking up to adults as role models. Like I mentioned when they called me Mr. Kyle, that was one of the policies actually at the school, is that you get called by your first name. Of course, they put Mr. in front of it, but that gives the learners, that gives the students more of a feeling of this relationship that they're building. It's more than just a teacher disseminating information. It's that relationship building because they want to know us as human beings and us to be able to support their growth as well.
And a curriculum that's rigorous and challenging. We're preparing your students for life after the middle school, the high schools. And we take that very, very seriously. Both Kyle and I are experienced high school teachers. We know firsthand exactly what kind of skills, what kind of capabilities do our graduates need after they leave the 8th grade. So the backbone of a Montessori education is to include the developmental needs of the age of the children or adolescents in the classroom. We can ignore it, but if we satisfy developmental growth needs, that will be the foundation for the academic outcomes we all want to see happening. For the young adolescent, whether they come to a Montessori school or go to some other middle school, they will always be working on trust, on self-expression, on new ways of thinking, and on being able to commit and be responsible. Your adolescent at home seems angry. They put the books down, slamming things, but they're not angry. Their body is out of control, trying to balance and integrate this emerging new adult body. So they're constantly working on trusting themselves. Am I the person who went to sleep, or am I somehow somebody different? Not only me, but if Kyle and I were the best of friends in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, all of a sudden we don't like each other in 7th grade. We don't know why we don't like each other, but we just are bugging each other crazy. Well, he's growing and changing, and I'm growing and changing, and in our program, that's not something we ignore. We facilitate and help them to communicate in a new way. Trust of another is always part of the adolescent development. Self-expression.
Yeah, and another thing you probably have noticed with your elementary child, and I notice this as well when I go down to the elementary classrooms, You ask an elementary school student, are you a writer? Yes. Are you an author? Yes. Are you an artist? Yes. They can do anything, right? And adolescent kids, of course, we want that for them. We want them to think that they can do anything, but they're struggling with this identity, right? They're struggling with this kind of self-perception. And as Montessori said, this is a pivotal time to help them explore their own self-expression. Where's their voice? Where's their identity? This is something they're starting to explore and really starting to become very proud of that identity. And so self-expression is a pivotal part of the adolescent program through arts, through movement, and through talk.
One of the forms of self-expression is talk, and middle school students talk all the time. All the time. And then they talk on their screens, and then they repeat, and they talk some more, and they talk some more. One of the reasons is it's how their brain develops. Just as a 1 and a 2-year-old has to move, we call them toddlers. And none of us would think about preventing 1 and 2-year-old children from moving so much. Worldwide, middle schoolers are prevented from talking so much. And every time they're prevented from talking, it disrupts the growth of the brain, which is supposed to evolve into new abilities for thinking. You and I, with the adult brain, we think with language, we're capable of analyzing, we're capable of reasoning, and all of that is just beginning in middle school. Being creative in a new way, problem solving, being innovative and thinking analytically happens as they trust themselves and as they work with all of that self-expression, which helps that brain to evolve.
And like I said, elementary school kids, learning is so exciting for them, and we want to keep that, of course. But for adolescents, it really needs to have meaning. What's the purpose of it? Okay, and so that's where it comes really with commitment and responsibility. They need to be given work that they find personally meaningful, things they connect to with their own interests, and things that are serving of value in the world. And Paul already mentioned this. This is a hallmark program, or hallmark component, the Montessori program, is that they are going to be running their own business, right? I mean, how many schools do you know where the kids, for their entire experience, they're running businesses, right? They're acting as mini entrepreneurs. Because we know about business, this is something that never stops and never quits. What better way to learn about the way the world works than through a business?
So the summary is that our graduates after 8th grade have developed very high-level habits of thinking. They have developed the ability to persist, grit. When frustrated, they have strategies and skills to keep going. And emotional regulation. Harvard University, after its intensive multi-decade study of grown adults and surveying and interviewing about their backgrounds, concluded that those 3 characteristics are predictors of success after university, success in life. Measures of joy, measures of happiness, measures of economic success as well.
What about your actual program? What are you teaching? Well, rest assured, your kids are still going to get, the subjects that you remember, the science, the maths, the language, the PE, right? All of these subjects that all other international schools here are emphasizing that we know is important. But as we spoke about earlier, it's not about the content that we're getting from these subjects, it's about how we use those.
But here's the thing. How we learn influences who we become. And what we want for you to hold on to this evening is this Montessori middle school how math, how the history, the science, and the subjects that you see, how that occurs will influence your child becoming ready in the second quarter of the 21st century for this future that none of us know.
And we asked, I hope I'm not putting her too much on the spot here, but we asked Ada, who's the head of Chinese, we said, what's your dream? What's your dream vision for a year 7, 8 student? And she said, my dream would be that in both languages, they're able to be fluently running a business. They know all the academics around it. They know how to communicate, right, with people in both languages. And we said, that's a great vision because that connects directly to, the Montessori program as well. This is, again, hallmark tenets, is that they're taking on a business of their choosing. And it's not just done in English. It's also, run in Chinese as well.
And a very large part of our program will be local and international travel. As part of the process of these trips, the students are planning. They're preparing the itinerary. They're researching and getting ready to book the tickets and the hotels. The program is designed in 4 quarters. Between the quarters, we have what we call an inter-session week. And during that week is the opportunity for local travel. If it hasn't occurred during the quarter, because some of our science experiments, we need to travel here, or history experiments and experiences go there. And then once a year, our goal is to have a major international travel.
So we are referencing standards for each of the subjects when we're designing these experiences, which we're going to share in a second how we do that. But just know that for each subject, there is a benchmark. In most schools, a lot of schools actually in Hong Kong are using these as references. Okay, Common Core standards, the social studies C3 standards, and next generation science standards. The last thing we're thinking about when we are organizing learning, we talked about the skills. What are the skills of the future? But the World Economic Forum has given 5 skills that they believe, and this is through heavy research from all leaders of industry and government, these are the 5 skills most necessary in the future. So these are the 5. Okay, you guys have pretty much called them out. Okay? Now, you've seen a lot. You've seen the 5 top future skills. You've seen, here's this different standards that we're going to be addressing. Okay? You've seen, hey, we take an inquiry-based approach. And here's the question you might be asking. Doesn't MYP, doesn't the International Baccalaureate Program, it's inquiry-based. Don't they do the same thing? Here's where we take it a step farther. So, here's the difference. Here's how we're organizing the curriculum. We start with a big, big question, okay? How do we use data to make a positive impact on a waterway, a local waterway, okay? So, the way we're trying to organize our curriculum is that students are actually actively addressing problems, not just giant questions. We want them to explore these giant questions, but we want them to actually be participating and making a difference, right? So we look at the subjects, and then we think of the skills as well that they're going to need to know as well. But instead of teaching these things in isolation, we don't go, you're going to need to know this, so we're going to teach you this now, and then you're going to do it. We get them actively learning right away. So if you think of this in 3 simple stages, it's what do I need to know to be able to answer this question, and how am I accessing that information, okay? They're learning from experts, okay, about the whole water quality situation, about the water conservation. They're analyzing those water samples. So they're going through this investigative, inquiry-based experience, and they have more questions that are coming up, more things that they're learning. As they're learning those things, they're compiling and synthesizing those things together in terms of, well, what am I going to do to address that? They're presenting to actual environmental engineers. They're presenting to people who can give them real feedback on their work and make sure that work has a larger impact. They're learning the subjects because they need to know the subject content, but they're also gaining these skills as a result. You actually are sharing your solutions with creativity, originality. These are 2 different solutions, equally creative, equally as impactful to address that issue. One created toxic-free cosmetics. That's one of her interest points. One is creating reusable bags out of all upcycled clothing. Actually got put into a supermarket down the street. So every one of these students has a different way of addressing this, but they're answering the same question, learning the same content, getting the same skills, but doing it in a way that is personally meaningful to them. Simple structures beget complex behaviors. Complex structures beget simple behaviors. We are trying to organize learning with a simple structure to really get these complex behaviors that we know Montessori said were so important to get out of our learners.
So I'm going to pivot just very briefly to give you some mental image of where this all might be taking place. Just to orient you, this is on the ground floor, on this floor level of our school. If you have ever volunteered in the garden area outside, that bank of windows across from you, if you've been down to the basketball court looking across that bank of windows, that whole bank of windows, which is now a lovely office area for so many of our supporting staff and our operations team, will become the middle school space. And the green sort of turf area that you see there, that's going to be the out front of that middle school space. So that entire space is about 3 classrooms worth of space. We'll have capacity for up to 75 students as we get going and progress. It's 7-8 mixed age space. And you can see some common areas and then also breakout rooms. A lot of flexibility available in that space because it's going to be a dynamic moving inquiry-based learning area. And then of course, here's some mock-ups of some of what that interior is going to look like. Some of it will have a fairly homey, welcoming feel to it as well. Adolescents will be connected in that way. And there'll also be a kitchen pantry area right with the students' access there. Might be used for business, but will certainly be used for their day-to-day as well. This type of space, this type of flexibility, this type of community, how adaptable it will be to the needs and interests of the students.
I think the biggest question on many people's minds is, so what happens after the middle school, right? Right now, after elementary, this is our last year's acceptance into schools, and we're doing very well. So what we're saying is, what's going to happen if the transition point is 2 years later? So This is a bit hard to read, but it's really to show how we match other schools' years. You can see that IMS is at the top first, so the Casa dei Bambini matches towards some early childhood and primary schools, etc. So if we look down at the middle school, that's the age of the grades 7 and 8. So the middle school will be a 2-year mixed age class. And then after finishing that 2-year, the beautiful thing is that they enter into the different systems at academically very good point. So if you look at the IB system, they go into basically the last 2 years of IB, which are the times when the IB really ramps up for the MYP. Now the IB middle years program, it's really quite flexible, but the last 2 years is the part which is most important. So we'll go into the last 2 years of MYP for those who want to go that way. In the UK system, you're going into the IGCSE exams. That's a 2-year program. And then in the US, you're going into high school. So in terms of academically, we're entering at very logical points. We have a new secondary school counselor, Harry, that she will also be looking at our bridges to other schools after the middle school as well. For those staying in Hong Kong, that also gives more transition points to our families and children.